Folks, today we're going to talk about this New York Post story from Murdoch Media. Murdoch owned New York Post Media is using this story about Russian and Iranian bots on Twitter to essentially smear anybody who's against the war in Iran. And I have the receipts, folks. I have the videos and I have the proof that this is such a sneaky, disingenuous op. And this same group that the New York Post is referencing, they recently worked with Jordan Peterson to smear the term Christ is King. They've also worked in the past to work with the ADL and police disinformation. And part of their anti Semitism disinformation includes basically smearing Republicans who criticize George Soros. They've collaborated with 60 Minutes to put an op saying that QAnon has rebranded to be against the COVID vaccine. And the reason that QAnon is against the COVID vaccine is because QAnon knows if the pandemic ends, they lose their power. So they're secretly trying to stop people from taking the good vaccine. I mean, the list goes on and on. I hope you guys stay tuned. Give me a thumbs up on the chat. Give me a thumbs up on the video for the algorithm. Subscribe if you like. And I think this is going to be the best breakdown of this really sneaky story that pro-Israel people are repeating because it's in New York Post. I'm going to debunk it. I'm going to expose it. And I hope you guys watch and share this video because I think it's important and not a lot of people know this. So Dream Rare Podcast starts now. Thanks for being here.
It's the Dream Rare Podcast. Welcome to the show. The way to get the news at the desk or on the road. Let's go. God is great and success in our control. The world is crazy, but we get better from obstacles. Yeah.
What's going on YouTube? What's going on Facebook? What's going on Rumble and everybody else? Days like this remind me of why I need to work and why I need to put in these hours because, I've done a lot of research in the past. So I already had a compilation of this organization and why they suck. So I think I'm going to really give one of the best breakdowns of what's going on here and how they're really just trying to smear opponents of the war in Iran. And it makes absolutely no sense. So let's quick look at the story. You might have seen it on social media, especially people that are super Zionist or pro-Israel. They're sharing this as a massive bombshell where they're like saying, see, I told you so. I told you that people that don't want to start a war as much as Mark Levin, they're working for a foreign country. They're working for Iran. They're working for Russia. Before I even looked into this story, I'm just going to say I knew it probably didn't have a lot of merit because it's the same tactics they always do. You could find a compilation of Bibi Netanyahu from the 1990s saying that Iran was going to have nukes in 3 months, blah, blah, blah. Like it's the same narrative on loop. But outside of that, when it comes to the bots, we've already lived through this. When Trump won the election, they said Russian bots helped Trump win the election. Russian bots are Bernie bros. Russian bots are Hillary supporters. I remember reading articles about Facebook. They're saying that, Russia rigged the election for Trump. And you see the ads they ran. It was like they ran like Jesus versus the devil ads, like really low level stuff that really didn't even reach that many people. And they tried to make it seem like it was this huge deal just to delegitimize Trump's election. So I've already seen this narrative of we're just going to say that bots online are helping the people we disagree with because we want to start a war with Russia. So we'll blame Russia. Oh, now we want to start a war with Iran. Now we'll blame Iranian bots. Of course, there's probably bots from every country online, including our allies and probably our intelligence communities. But you very rarely see them say, oh, look, our greatest allies are running ops or paying for ads or, our intel communities are doing it or the Democrats are doing it. It's always like Russia and Iran because they're starting wars with Russia and Iran. But anyway, let's get into the story because I got a lot of information here. So here's the story first, and then we're going to get into who this group actually is that the New York Post is referencing. So they ran this headline. It says, Rogue States, Russia and Iran attempting to destroy MAGA movement with disinformation bot army. I mean, it sounds exactly like the stories they ran during the election to delegitimize Trump. Low IQ boomers that probably poop their pants like cat turd. He says they're easy to spot. So he's trying to run with this narrative that anybody who disagrees with Trump on the war in Iran, they have to be these Iranian Russian bots. Let's read the New York Post article. They said, they're used to amplify real-life influencers who post untrue false flag narratives designed to discredit President Donald Trump and his conservative stalwarts, according to a bombshell new report by the new Network Contagion Research Institute, a politically neutral nonprofit who study extremism on the web. They're not neutral, but they claim to be. Okay, let's look at the report from them. It says new. Counterfeit MAGA influencers exposed, foreign bot farms renting our flag. Foreign spook shops are mass-producing Patriot accounts, slapping stars and stripe avatars on Macedonian spam and pumping Kremlin-Tehran talking points into your feed. A new NCRI dossier shows you 650,000 false flag posts since May, 4 million fake interactions to frame Hamas atrocities as CIA ops, smear Trump as an Epstein crony, and cheer Iran's nukes. So first of all, didn't Elon just say that Trump was complicit in the Epstein? Is Elon Musk working with Iran and Russia because he mentions it? How about the fact that there's all sorts of connections to American politicians to Epstein? Does that matter or no? Is it all just this crazy, Epstein conspiracy theory that politicians in charge work with Epstein? Before I get into what I think about their claims and how fishy they are, let's look into this organization, because if you're just reading it and you have a pro-Israel or pro-Trump bias, you might think, yeah, no, that makes sense. Everybody that I don't like must be influenced by Iran and Russia, and there must be this massive campaign to basically smear President Trump. Now let's get into who the NCRI is, the National Network Contagion Research Institute, because they are a horrific organization that tends to push narratives that are not only anti-conservative, claiming to be neutral, but just in my opinion, anti-American, pro-pharmaceutical, and during the lockdowns, just anti-freedom, and trying to do the most disingenuous spins on everything. I mean, they're awful. So this is from my video I did exposing Jordan Peterson, because he worked with them to smear Christ is King as some sort of anti-Semitic, warrior call. So here's a few clips that are relevant to this. Why is Jordan Peterson working with groups that help to police quote unquote misinformation about COVID vaccines, tried to tie skepticism of COVID vaccines to Russian disinformation, and a group that works with the ADL to quote, study how hate and extremism spread on social media? The ADL called for Donald Trump to be removed from office, by the way, at the end of his first term. But let's deep dive into this, because Jordan Sneaky Peterson is trying a little bit too hard to police the phrase Christ is King. So if you're following this group, Network Contagion Research Institute, now, because there's a lot of Trump supporters that are on the fence, like there's the Mark Levins, there's the Ben Shapiros, there's the cat turds who they support Trump either because they like Trump a lot, or, they have sort of a bias towards the Israel side of the war, let's just say. And then there's a lot of, the Steve Bannons, Alex Jones, Owen Schroyer. I don't know. I could go on and on. I mean, I'm just naming a few. I would say Dave Smith. There's people that like Trump, but they don't want war with Iran. Tucker Carlson, Sager from Breaking Points. And there's been I would say, a pretty healthy debate between it. So this Network Contagion Research Institute is jumping to the thing to act like they're super mad. They're like, there's accounts pretending to be patriots against Donald Trump. And it's like, if you look at their history, like I said, they used Russian disinformation as a reason. Like, it was this whole smear campaign saying that people are against vaccines because Kremlin linked things are pushing anti-vax content. So they tried to publish this whole article saying that anti-vaxxers were essentially inspired by Russian disinformation. You can't possibly be against the vaccine on your own. I'm not saying they exactly said that, but you get it. They're sowing this narrative like, oh, these anti-vaxxers are just really getting tricked by Russia. Here's what I'll say before I show you more about the Network Contagion Research Institute. This is something that a lot of people don't do because there's so much propaganda going around on all sides. It's like, what's true and what's false? Let's just say Trump says the sky's blue. Soleimani, he's dead. Whatever, Khamenei, I don't know the names of the Iranians. Let's just see, he says the sky's gray. Netanyahu says it's purple. And then, Putin says it's cloudy. It's like, what is actually the truth? Like, all these leaders, all these intel communities, all these people on Twitter, there could be fake bots, real bots, people that act like bots, normal people. I understand that there's a lot of propaganda and everybody's trying to either make money online or essentially win the propaganda war. But what they never seem to point out is like, what is true? Let's just say there are Russian bots pushing anti-vaccine information. I don't get influenced by bots because I already know what's going on. So there were QAnon people pushing fake stuff about the vaccine. And then there were QAnon people pushing real stuff about the vaccine. And a lot of people in QAnon were not pro-vaccine, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're wrong about that. They might be wrong about JFK Jr., like rolling out of the grave and saving the country. But at the same time, these groups, they try to use stuff like that in order to confuse people. You're like, oh yeah, that must be Russian. Like, my knowledge of the pharmaceutical industry has nothing to do with Russia, has nothing to do with Russian bots. But if they can frame it that way, it's like, oh, all these people over here, it's just all this Russian disinformation. Trump supporters are Russian disinformation. People who like Bernie more than Hillary, they're getting tricked by Russian disinformation. Really what they're trying to say is, We control the narrative. We want you to think a certain way. And if you don't think a certain way, we're going to find every way to undermine your opinion, because that's easier than actually having a conversation about the merits of what you're saying. Because if we actually had a conversation about the merits of what you're saying, you would probably win the argument, because the truth is, even Ben Shapiro is like, they lied. Pfizer lied. The government lied. Yeah, I was 3 years ahead of Ben Shapiro, not because of Russian disinformation or these fraudulent organizations trying to frame everybody against masks and vaccines as Russia, but just because of basic information, the truth, science, education, research, understanding the collaboration and the partnership between the government, the pharmaceutical industry, and the corruption that was happening and the money on the line has nothing to do with Russia. But that's the same group that's pushing these stories to smear people against the Iran war. They were doing the same thing then. When it comes to anti-Semitism, and this is something that I've warned conservatives about for years, even if you're pro-Israel and you don't like anti-Semites on Twitter or whatever you want to say everybody is, don't you realize that they use the term anti-Semitism to protect George Soros? And if you don't believe me, here's this organization, the NCRI, running ops against conservatives to say that there's too much anti-Semitic content and disinformation on Twitter, including tweets from Jack Posobiec, who just so happens to be against the Iran war. Do you notice something? Listen, I've met Jack. He's a nice guy. We get along. I've met him in person, but in general, no offense to Jack, like, we don't really agree on everything. We just don't. And I'm not somebody who really listens to what he's saying, in the sense of, like, I don't get information from him. I don't care what he thinks. I just notice a pattern. It's like, I'm not justifying everything Jack's ever said or did, because we disagree on some things. But the truth is, like, why would this group be smearing Jack essentially as anti-Semitic disinformation for talking about George Soros? Why would this group be seemingly running cover for him and smearing conservatives? Is this an organization that the New York Post is trying to trick people into thinking is like some based pro-Trump organization? I mean, take a watch. Well, of course, they're policing anti-Semitic disinformation online and anti-Jewish conspiracy theories, they say. Let's read into this fascinating piece. They mention George Soros a lot as an example of camouflage conspiracy theories. At one point, they said wealthy financier and Jewish Holocaust survivor George Soros is the subject of several conspiracy theories, including one where he is secretly a Nazi. In this report, they mentioned that Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban even enacted a law that made it illegal in that country to help undocumented immigrants and named it the Stop Soros Law. India is having an issue with George Soros. I believe that there were some of his offices were raided for some reason. I haven't got fully into that story, but I do know that politicians in India were told by the U.S. State Department at one point that they were being anti-Semitic for sharing George Soros cartoons. In this report, they also mentioned Jack Posobiec, where he, I guess, tweeted, Antifa is paid by DNC funder George Soros, but not one Democrat is being asked to condemn them for Charlottesville. Most Republicans don't realize this because, of course, they're against anti-Semitism, and a lot of them support Israel, but they don't understand how that word is being used, what definition is being passed into legislation. I've mentioned it several times, but also these groups that now Jordan Peterson's working with are gung-ho at smearing even Republicans and conservatives who mention George Soros in a way that they find distasteful. I guess these are the people that get to police misinformation and disinformation and hate speech. I mean, these darn QAnoners and their mask conspiracy theories. I didn't like wearing a mask, and when it's all said and done, even Ben Shapiro admitted that the government and Pfizer lied to us, but this group seemed to be pushing a narrative in that direction.
But we now know that we were lied to by everyone. We were lied to by the scientists. We were lied to by Pfizer. We were lied to by the government. We were lied to by the Biden administration. We were lied to. I don't like being lied to. I don't know about you.
So this Network Contagion Research Institute, led by Finkelstein, Goldenberg, they're basically putting out these anti-Semitism disinformation reports where they're framing George Soros as a wealthy Jewish financier and Holocaust survivor to give him this sense of like, oh my gosh, George Soros is such a victim. I mean, how dare Jack Posobiec and conservatives talk about this victim survivor, George Soros? Like, I mean, how dare them? That's anti-Semitism. This is the same group that the New York Post is publishing to smear opponents of the Iran war. And if you want to see Mr. Finkelstein on 60 Minutes, here's a little clip. I have two of them of Finkelstein on 60 Minutes with, is that Barbara Walters? I'm sorry. I get these like old hags confused. I mean, lovely women who have just contributed so much to our country with really good journalism. But is this Barbara Walters? Let me know in the clip. They're suggesting that QAnon, listen, I don't I'm not a fan of QAnon. I think it's controlled opposition. I think it's a way to wrangle people into conspiracy theories, give them half truths and half lies, and make them worship Donald Trump so they don't realize that he's working for the same people Epstein worked for. I don't like QAnon at all. But here's what I would never say about QAnon, because I don't think it's true. This is what they're saying. They're saying QAnon secretly basically knew that the vaccine was good, and they didn't want everyone to get the vaccine because they knew if everybody got the vaccine, it would be good, and then the pandemic would end. And QAnon didn't want the pandemic would end because that gives them this extremist power. This is what old lady number 7,000 NPC news puppet and Joel Finkelstein said on 60 Minutes during the lockdown. They were using their platform to smear people against vaccines and masks.
Where is QAnon today?
Now they've been rebranded.
It's morphing and doubling down on conspiracies.
It can cause things like autism.
About COVID vaccines and masks. Finkelstein says it makes sense for them to be anti-vax. If the pandemic ends, and if enough people get vaccinated and we have herd immunity, will this thing begin to shrivel?
Let's hear what Mr. Finkelstein says, the expert that the New York Post is using to basically police misinformation about the Iran war with this false narrative that everybody that is against the Iran war and against Mark Levin's, insatiable war agenda, they must just be, influenced by foreign countries. Let's listen to expert Joel Finkelstein. He sounds like a real genius over there.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. Doesn't that make sense for why the new target of the conspiracies is the vaccine? Because that's exactly what gives the extremist powers, Leslie.
You're saying they need the pandemic, they need the eyeballs spending 12 and more hours a day. And if we can get rid of this pandemic and isolation and quarantine, then are you suggesting the oxygen is depleted?
That is the oxygen.
But the end of the pandemic is far off.
The only thing stupider and faker than QAnon, because to be honest, I do think it's fake and stupid, is Barbara Walters, possibly. I don't know who that lady is. Let me know in the comment section. And Joel Finkelstein suggesting that QAnon knows that vaccines are good, and QAnon knows that if everybody got vaccinated, the pandemic would end. So QAnon is purposely, against vaccines and tricking people purposely because, they know if everybody gets the vaccine, the pandemic's going to end. I think that's the only thing I've heard dumber than actual QAnon. So congratulations to Joel Finkelstein and possibly, allegedly, maybe Barbara Walters. I don't. Can you guys let me know? Is that Barbara Walters? I feel like it is, but I have no idea. That's like the dumbest thing I've ever. These are the experts that the New York Post is referring to, and I want to say this too, because when you look at this organization of NCRI, they're constantly policing misinformation and disinformation and COVID vaccines and masks and Iran and Russia, and they just so happen to have the same agenda of not Epstein. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say that. I meant like Ted Cruz and Lindsey Graham, whatever. They just so happen to have that, right? You look at Leslie Stahl. Okay, it's Leslie Stahl. I'm sorry, Barbara Walters. I get old ladies who lie on television confused. So Leslie Stahl. I apologize. Baba Wawa or whatever her name was. I did not mean, you're catching loose ones here. I didn't mean to. So Leslie Stahl. Anyway, they do all this stuff, right? And then I pointed out in the first video, I'm going to play it again in a second, they collaborated with Jordan Peterson to run an op against Christ is King, right? If you look at Goldenberg, Finkelstein, and most of that, I'm not doing I'm not 21andMe or anything, but I would assume, just looking at the names on that list, I would assume that like 50% of, some of their hierarchy is Jewish. Maybe it's less, but let's just say it is. Do you think they would like if somebody tried to say that their religion, like for Christ is King, that's like a statement that Christians, it's Christ, their God, their Lord and Savior is King. Do you think Jewish people would like it if a Christian organization ran an op with Jordan Peterson and said, when you talk about Mashiach or you talk about this, it's secretly extremism? No, of course not. They wouldn't like it. They would say it's anti-Semitism. They'd be like, that's so anti-Semitic. We can say whatever we want. We're allowed to say who we want to rule the world. That's our religion. For some people, it's their ethnicity. They would call it anti-Semitism. Yet they feel so emboldened to run an op with Jordan Peterson and claiming that Christ is King is this like secretly anti-Semitic, anti-whatever, like rallying call to the troops on Twitter. Like every op they've ever ran is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. They said QAnon is basically trying to stop people from getting vaccines because they know it would end the pandemic and give them less power. Stupidest thing I've ever heard. claiming that Russian disinformation was a reason that people distrusted COVID vaccines and Russia was sending information. And here's what they do. Let's just say there's Russian news stations or Russian people in Russia that think that the vaccine isn't as great as they say it is, like there were people in Europe and America. They'll be like, look, Russia's saying that it isn't good. And then the people in America see it and they're sharing each other's content. It's like you're sharing other people's content as well. What's the truth? Who cares what Russia's saying? Who cares what Trump is saying? He calls himself the father of the vaccine. Putin's selling vaccines too. All the countries of the world are selling vaccines basically, except for Belarus. Maybe they were too, but I know that guy wasn't really pro lockdown. But in general, it's like, what's the truth? They never talk about the truth. It's always these very sneaky, disingenuous ways to be like, well, technically, you're sharing Russian. Well, aren't you sharing Israeli content? Aren't you sharing Indian content? Aren't you sharing Ukrainian content? Probably, but does that mean necessarily you're wrong? No. Does that mean you're working with Ukraine or Israel? Not necessarily. It just means we live on the World Wide Web and everybody's sharing everybody's content. But what's the truth? Like if Russia and Ukraine say one thing, Israel and Palestine say one thing, Iran says this, Trump says this, what matters is what's the truth? What is the truth about the vaccine? What is the truth about forced masking? I don't care what Lukashenko says from Belarus. I don't care what Donald Trump says. I don't care what Fauci says. I don't care what Finkelstein says or Leslie Stallworth or whatever her name is. Leslie Stahl. Leslie got a stall because we can't go. What is the truth? They never talk about that because they're not being honest. Once again, I'm going to play this clip again. Jordan Peterson ran an op with these same people, and just look at their track record of all these sneaky things they did. Oh, and by the way, before I play this clip, this new, I'm going to show you guys again in a second, this new New York Post clip. They're like, all these people are trying to sow division within the MAGA and Trump movement. You guys work with the ADL to police misinformation on the online. The ADL themselves called for Trump to be removed from office. I think it was after January 6th, but it's like you're now so MAGA, the people who work with the Anti-Defamation League to police hate speech online, the organization that called for Trump to be removed on office. And these are the people that are tricking the cat turds of the world. Cat turds IQ, I would be shocked if it's triple digits. I mean, maybe it is, but I'd be shocked. Cat turd looks like a guy who poops his own pants and just drinks like Coca-Cola 8 times a day. Like the guy is an absolute moron. He's like, yeah, we got him, guys. We got the foreign guy. Anybody who doesn't like Trump works. You don't even know the organization that you're referencing. And if you read the article, they don't even have like legitimate proof. They're like, people are sharing things on social media, so that means everybody against the Iran war is like really working with them. And Cat Turd's like, we got him. This is the organization that you're trusting, Cat Turd. Not that you even think for yourself. You'd probably lick dog poop off of Donald Trump's shoes, say it tasted like Willy Wonka's chocolate, and then say that everybody who didn't want to lick dog poop off Donald Trump's shoes was working for a foreign country. That's the level of IQ and manlyhood in this guy. But here's that clip again. Same group. Why is Jordan Peterson working with groups that help to police quote unquote misinformation about COVID vaccines, tried to tie skepticism of COVID vaccines to Russian disinformation, and a group that works with the ADL to quote, study how hate and extremism spread on social media? The ADL called for Donald Trump to be removed from office, by the way, at the end of his first term. But let's deep dive into this because Jordan Sneaky Peterson is trying a little bit too hard to police the phrase Christ is King. All right, let me read a little bit of one of the articles because this same group that Cat Turd is pooping his pants over, they wrote some really interesting stuff during lockdowns about people that distrusted COVID vaccines. Ready? I'm going to read an article. It's from Security Magazine, but they're referencing the NCRI. It says, disinformation, long used to spread and advance political ideologies, is now being used to damage Western corporations and economies, as reported by the Network Contagion Research Institute. It says, the actors and methods employed to influence elections and spread falsehoods to polarize the United States are now being leveraged for economic warfare. I'm going to scroll down a little bit. It says NCRI also analyzed over 17 million Twitter posts mentioning 5G. Oh, now they're experts on 5G. That's good to know. I mean, oh man, 17 million Twitter users talked about 5G from 2018 to 2021, starting with the COVID-19 pandemic. Wow, this dude, they're not only an expert on COVID misinformation, masks, vaccines, and QAnon, but they're also experts on 5G. Thank goodness. They said NCRI also examined anti-vaccination disinformation, Russian campaigns to seek to degrade Western vaccine confidence and promote Russia's Sputnik vaccine. To gauge the information landscape related to American vaccines, NCRI identified over 4 million articles since January of 2020 mentioning American pharmaceutical companies involved in COVID-19 vaccine production: Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, and Pfizer. More than 500,000 are from known disinformation sources, and their content generated from known disinformation outlets generate the most engagement. So, these poor American companies, Pfizer, Moderna, and Johnson & Johnson, I mean, wow, this is high-level economic warfare. I mean, all these people criticizing Pfizer and Moderna and Johnson & Johnson, over half of them are coming from known disinformation and misinformation services. It's like, is this organization looking into the history of Pfizer? Feel free to look into Russia and their corruption in Sputnik too. I don't care about that vaccine because, to be honest, it wasn't offered to me and it wasn't the situation I was dealing with. I was dealing with an American lockdown and an American vaccine. But did this genius organization, did they do a deep dive on Pfizer? Did they do a deep dive on the history of the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act? Did they do a deep dive on the history of the PrEP Act? Did they do a deep dive into the emergency use, or did they do a deep dive into literally anything about the COVID? They were rolling out the vaccine in like May, June, and they're like, wow, look at all the cases going down. And I'm thinking to myself then, right? I'm thinking, I'm not saying the vaccine is or isn't working. I'm not qualified to do that. There's not enough data. But because my IQ isn't as low as cat turds, and I don't just lick dirt off Trump's shoes, I was like, well, they're rolling out the vaccine in summer. And if you look at any sort of flu or virus season, it's like usually summer is better than winter, almost always. I mean, the data is pretty consistent of that over the last century. And they rolled it out in like May and June. And I remember even people like Rand Paul, from what I remember, I don't want to say for sure, but they were like, look how effective it is or whatever. Maybe it wasn't Rand Paul. Maybe I'm getting things mixed up. But all these Americans were saying that the vaccine had to be working well because like the data just was so great from the vaccine rollout. And I'm like, wait till October, November, and December come around. And what do you know? As soon as the winter comes around, they're like, oh, we need another booster. It's not working like we thought it would. The efficacy dropped. Dude, if you roll out a vaccine around a time that most people naturally get healthier consistently and then claim credit for cases going down, you could roll out any product. I could sell sourdough bread. I could sell water, soda. It doesn't matter. I could start giving it out to people like a lemonade stand around May, June, July and be like, look, everybody's healthier this month. It doesn't mean your product necessarily did it. Roll that same product out in November, December, and it's going to be worse. And it's not necessarily because the product's bad either, but it's simple. That's math. That's science. But what people don't understand, including this organization that just provides cover for the pharmaceutical industries, is these companies are in the business of selling their product. Pfizer got Trump to buy 100 million doses. Pfizer got Biden to buy 100 million doses. The federal government purchased doses of the Pfizer vaccine. Moderna had a joint contract with the government. Johnson & Johnson, I believe, got Operation Warp Speed money, and they got their product purchased. So it's like, is your job to really investigate and be like, hey, you know what? Our product's not as good as we said it. No, of course not. You're going to use every little bit of data, like the book says, How to Lie with Statistics, and be like, wow, we rolled it out in June. Whoa, the numbers are so good. Oh, wait. Now the numbers aren't good. Should we admit that we were wrong? No. Let's keep saying it's misinformation and let's roll out a booster shot. So then people have to get another one and another one and another one every year like a flu shot. They're never going to sit and be like, you know what? Actually, it wasn't what we told you. They're not in the business of that. Why would they? It's a multi-billion-dollar product for them. And if they can convince people to get it every year like a flu shot, it's eventually going to be a $1 trillion product. So they're not in the business of telling you. You think Coca-Cola is going to get on television and be like, you know what? High fructose corn syrup's not that good for you. It's really not that great. No, they don't care. You think they care if somebody drinks Coca-Cola 5 times a day? They're not going to be like, hey, buddy, you should probably relax on the Coca-Cola. It's good for a snack, but it's not really like sustainable for 5 days. They don't give a shit. It's their product. They're making money. They're in the process of using polar bears in advertisements to be like, oh, it's so cold. Are you hot? It's like, yeah, it's 95 degrees out. Okay, drink a polar bear cola. Okay, I got you. So, where is this organization talking about that? They don't give a shit. they're basically providing cover for their agenda. They provided cover for the pharmaceutical industry. They provided cover for the government. They provided cover for, you know, certain vaccine companies. And now they're providing cover for the Israel-Iran war because they are supportive of Israel. They probably have an ethnic bias, although you're not allowed to say they are because that's anti-Semitism, aka the truth. But in general, it's like, why would they be running a Christ is King op? If Christians ran a Jewish op or whatever against their religion or their ethnicity, they would be freaking out calling it anti-Semitism. But when Jordan Peterson partners with them to try to demonize the term Christ is King because they're weirdos, oh, it's okay that they do that. Now they're tricking New York Post and Cat Turd and a bunch of people that are pro-Trump into thinking that they're some sort of like bastion of truth. And like if they were even halfway honest and halfway conservative in any way, they would have been running studies to figure out why Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, and the government were lying. Instead, they did the opposite and ran cover for those people. So, if Cat Turd, the low IQ, boomer brain, fake cowboy who looks like he poops his pants on a daily basis and just lets it sit there and fester because he's a weirdo, that's just what he looks like. I'm not saying he does that, but he looks like the type of guy that craps his pants, sits there, and just sits on Twitter all day. If Cat Turd was, criticizing the pharmaceutical industry during 2021, which he probably was, I would guess, just knowing, his sort of like NPC archetype, I'm sure he was not like super pro big pharma. This organization was essentially working against him to make the case that Cat Turd was getting tricked by Russian disinformation. It's the same strategy they used during 2016. It can't be that America wants Trump, it's Russia. It can't be that people like Bernie more than Hillary, it's Russia. It can't be that this grandma likes Fox News more than CNN, it's Russia. The power goes out, it's Russia. We need to start a war with Russia. It's the deep state. They want to start a war with Russia, so they use Russia as every excuse. Now they're doing the same thing with Iran. They basically copy and pasted their stupid strategy that they used during the Hillary Clinton era to demonize anybody that didn't vote for Hillary instead of learning their lesson and saying it was all Russian bots and disinformation. I did a story back then too in 2017. They said, oh, these Russian accounts did this on social media and it reached that many people. The amount of people that they reached was less than I reached with, I have no advertisements. I reached more people in 2 weeks. So you're telling me Russia rigged the election by running a bunch of boomer ads about Jesus and the devil to people that were already going to vote for Trump anyway? That rigged the election, or a Bernie meme, or they're setting up these like protests. It was such a nothing burger, but because it went in the favor of Hillary Clinton, they made it seem like it was a huge deal. They're doing the same exact thing. This might be a different organization than the Hillary one. I think it is, to be honest, but it's like, it's the same strategy. It's like, let's just say there's Russian and Iranian bots that's influencing all the American discontent with the war. And it's anti-Trump and anti-America to disagree with them. Tucker Carlson is this. He's working for these people. Let's be honest. Trey Yanks tweeted this the other day. My two favorite mainstream media reporters, you don't have to like them. I don't care. You don't have to trust them. But my two favorites are Bill Malugin. He does a good job with the border. And I think Trey Yanks is the best reporter, at least that we have in American mainstream news, on the wars. He works out of Israel most of the time, but he's been all over the place. But I do believe he calls out all sides. I think he's as fair as they come in mainstream media. So he posted, he said, blowing up hospitals is wrong. Blowing up hospitals in Palestine's wrong. Blowing up hospitals in Israel's wrong. Blowing up hospitals in Iran is wrong, right? Seems like a pretty fair statement to me. I believe Trey is Jewish and he works out of Israel most of the time, but he's a nice guy, right? Even though I don't know what his bias is. I think he knows that his job is to just be a good reporter. Honestly, I think he's a great guy. I love Trey Yanks. And he says that, right? And then Dave Rubin is in the comment section. Dave Rubin's like, you got to be effing kidding me, man. And all these pro-Israel sycophants were just furious that he said that no hospital should be blown up because they want to blow up other hospitals, or they want the country that they like to blow up hospitals, but they don't want their hospitals blown up. So they start freaking out at Trey Yanks, right? And then Trey tweets, he goes, I wish everybody had to, report if they've ever taken money or free trips from a foreign nation. And when he tweeted that, he then responded, he goes, oh, all those people got real quiet now, because Trey Yanks knows, as somebody that's all around, a lot of the people that are sycophants for a certain country, they're linked to a foreign government. And, Trey was honest enough to say that. And he's like, oh, nobody wants to talk now, do they? I'd be totally fine with it. It's like, I know, I'm not going to say I know, but in general, like, I want to know who's working for what foreign country. Like all the people that are so pro-Israel that basically essentially seem like they work for Israel, they're like, oh, it's Qatar, it's this and that. And it's like, hey, if you want to be transparent, you want to look into Tucker and say like, hey, Tucker, have you ever taken money from Qatar? Have you ever taken any trips from Israel? I know being in Republican media, people offer people trips to Israel all the time. I got offered a trip to Israel. They said, do you want to meet with the Knesset of Israel? And I'm not going to say who, just out of respect, but it was a Republican influencer with a massive Israeli bias, and he's a total phony. I'm just being respectful now because I'm a nice guy, but he's a total phony. He's a total fraud. He's definitely one of these fake opposition Republicans who just rides Trump's coattails, hates on Thomas Massie, smears people who tell the truth about the wars. He wanted me to take a trip to Israel. So it's like to meet with the government. It's like, how would you organize a trip to meet with the government unless you're working with a foreign government? So these are always the people that are like, who's working for a foreign government? I don't know. Maybe you are, possibly. I don't know. But when it comes to Israel, it seems like that's the foreign government that everyone in America is allowed to work with because our politicians basically work with them. A lot of our media companies seem to work with them. Caroline Sagar pointed this out yesterday. It was good reporting. Caroline Leavitt said something that disagreed with the U.S. intel community, and the United States intel community said that this wasn't happening, and Mossad said it was happening, and Caroline Leavitt sided with Mossad over her own intel communities. Take it for what you will. I'm not saying you have to trust American intel, but it's pretty clear that our government seems just as connected to Mossad as they are to our own intel communities, and in some cases more. Like, they'll side with a foreign government over America when it comes to speech laws, when it comes to certain wars, when it comes to certain intel. I've never seen a Republican believe in a speech law. They say there's no such thing as hate speech. There's no such thing as speech laws. We don't want to turn out like Australia, Canada, and Europe, right? They all say that. They don't believe in hate speech. Yet all those same Republicans pass and support hate speech laws for Israel. This is when I got basically kicked out of the club, was when I noticed that. And I was like, wait, I thought we didn't agree with hate speech laws. And the entire Republican media, the entire Republican, even like Trump movement, there's some good people in there, but it's all fake opposition. They're all basically telling you one thing and then doing the opposite for Israel. So when I noticed that, I was like, even if you're pro-Israel, like why would you pass hate speech laws in America for them? Because then that's at the behest of us. Now we're going to be called anti-Semites for talking about a foreign government. That's just weird. Like it's anti-American, it's anti-First Amendment, it's anti-Christian, to be honest, because it includes the word Jesus in it. So they're trying to police Christian conversation about the death of Jesus Christ, which is very weird and obvious. But in general, that's what's going on. So I like the fact that Trey Yang said that, because on one hand, I think people should be free to disagree with any war policy. You could be pro-war, against war. You could want America to bomb Iran. You could not want them to. I just feel like the people that are so pro-Israel that they're basically working for Israel, their way of tricking people is by just going on the attack, accusing everybody else of working for a foreign country. And when it comes to people like Dave Smith has become like the Superman of like criticizing Israel or something. I don't know. He's like the figurehead. He's like the George Washington of disagreeing with Israel. Here's what I have to say about Dave Smith. We're different people, but I've noticed this, and I've told people this a while ago. Dave Smith is a Jewish American who has loyalty to America, who sees himself as an American father, an American patriot. He doesn't have loyalty to Israel, right? He's Jewish, but he's an American. And I know many Jewish people like this. I have a bunch of Jewish friends where they're American, they're not Israeli. They don't see themselves in Israel. They see Israel, but that's why Dave Smith makes everybody so mad. I'm not saying you have to like him or agree with him. It doesn't matter to me. But Dave Smith, the reason he pisses off Jewish people that have a bias towards Israel is because he's somebody without dual loyalty. So they pass these speech laws that say, you're not allowed to say that Jewish people have dual loyalty. But then Dave Smith doesn't have dual loyalty, and they bully him, trying to make him have dual loyalty. So it's like they don't want people in America to not have loyalty, and it really pisses them off. It's like when a black person's a conservative. It's the same exact dynamic. Like, black people, not all, but a lot of people get mad. Black organizations, Democrat organizations, they get so mad. How did Kanye West vote for Trump? How does Brandon Tatum think that? Why does Chad Jackson say that about Martin Luther King? Why is Candace Owens out there being an Uncle Tom or Aunt Tom? I guess she's an Aunt Tom. This is what a Democrat will say, or a black person that isn't a Republican. They hate Candace Owens more than they hate me, because they expect Candace to be on their side. It's the same thing with someone Jewish that doesn't support Israel. They hate Dave Smith because they're like, how dare you actually have loyalty to America? How dare you not have dual loyalty? How dare you? And it's like, dude, Dave, if there were more people like Dave, anti-Semitism would be down because people are like, oh, no, that's a guy that I would want to be my neighbor. That's a guy that clearly has loyalty to America, but they just don't like him. So it's like, I don't get it. Someone said you look like you won the 1960 Wimbledon men's final with that shirt anomaly. Dude, that's a really funny comment. I mean, I wish I won it. I mean, maybe not in 1960 because I wasn't alive, but I'll take that as a backhanded compliment that I enjoy. Backhanded, pun intended. You get it? Tennis players only. But anyway, it's all interesting stuff, but I will say this to wrap it up. I want to keep this under 50 minutes. This is the op that was written by the New York Times. Let's look over it. New York Post said, rogue states, Russia and Iran attempting to destroy MAGA movement with disinformation bot army, right? That's the story that they're running. A lot of people believed it, especially with the pro-Israel bias, because why not, right? Oh, our enemies are all working for Russia and Iran. It's a perfect way because you accuse people of the people you're starting a war with. You're like, if we can't fight these wars, you're working with them. We need to fight Russia. We need to fight Iran. And if you disagree, you're working with Iran or Russia. It's the same thing the Ukraine war people do. And it's the Network Contagion Research Institute. They did a dossier of 650,000 false flag posts. What is a false flag post? Why did they get to decide what a false flag post is? And this is all I'm asking. It's not that they're going to do it. And to be honest, it's not that I even care that they do it because I literally don't care. But you're putting in all this effort to try to figure out all these accounts that you say is posting false flag Russian content, which is like a broad, weird term that seems like you're just kind of like making up. A false flag is something that happens where there's a tragedy in order to start a war or do something. Now you're saying a false flag content is something that someone posts that disagrees with Israel. Okay, whatever. Are you doing the same post to try to figure out which pro-Israel people are working for the Israeli government? Are you doing one that says you posted, you retweeted Netanyahu, so that means that you're working with the Mossad? Like, they don't do the same thing because here's my thing as well. As an American citizen, you should be allowed to, have an opinion. Of course, I understand at times of war, people are a little bit more sensitive and you should side with America. Like, I get that. And I understand where people are coming from, but if someone retweets Netanyahu, these people are not going to do a report to be like, well, that's linked to them. But if someone tweets something that someone else tweeted, that happened to be someone in Russia or a Russian organization like Russia Television, it's like now that's Kremlin based or Tehran based. And it's like, there's all sorts of media companies around the world. I'm not saying I like them all, but BBC is the British government. Al Jazeera is funded by Qatar. PBS is funded by America. New York Times is owned by Rupert Murdoch. CNN, ABC, NBC are known pathological liars. I don't know who owns them, but it's not anybody I like or trust. We have slim pickings when it comes to media. I don't trust any media companies, but I think this is what really annoys me as somebody who loves America and sides with America. And this is my whole thought on the war as well, just like from a moral angle. If America's right and honest and better, I think there's an argument for more war. I'm not saying it's good, and somebody could be like more of a peacenik than I am and be like, I don't believe in any war. Yeah, neither do I. But like, let's just say there were some really bad people out there and America was really good. Like, personally, I believe I don't like crime. I don't like violent crime. I wish they went harder on crime in America. People are way too comfortable doing theft and all this sort of stuff. Like, I hate it. I wish they would crack down on it. But with all that being said, if the people cracking down aren't the moral ones and you're more wrong than you're right, then you're just evil. And that's the issue when I look at American media. Like, let's just take Russia out of it. CNN sucks. MSNBC sucks. NPR sucks. PBS sucks. Outside of Arthur. Arthur's cool. The aardvark, he's got a lot of swag, but besides him, sucks. Fox News, fake opposition. Controlled by the Murdochs. New York Post, fake opposition. PragerU, in my opinion, fake opposition. Daily Wire, fake opposition. It's like our entire media is fake and or gay, but usually just fake, sometimes gay when it's left wing. But anyway, like that, it doesn't take Russia or Iran. Like, I wish this wasn't the case. And I wish I could be like, American media was awesome. Pfizer's awesome. They're an American company. Thank you, Network Contagion Institute. These great American companies are being undermined by QAnon. Pfizer, I'm not a fan. Moderna, not a fan. Johnson & Johnson, not a fan. So it's like, I wish we had all these things that they're pretending like we have. So if you go on like Russia television or something, or Sputnik, I think is the name of one of their media companies, I don't even follow them, and they're hard to even find because America cracked down on them before the war, because America needs to fight them for Ukraine in order to weaken Russia. So Russia leaves Syria so they could take Syria so they could fight Iran for Israel. I mean oil, I mean Israel. But anyway, it's like this whole like side war. They shut down all the Russian media. I remember when that media kept coming in my feed. It's like, this was years ago. I haven't seen them in like 5 years. They would say things that, I'm not saying all the time, but would make sense. And it's such a sad, sad sight for America when our media companies are so fake and stupid that some foreign ones make more sense. You understand what I'm saying? Like, let's just say Russell Brand. I don't know if he's an American citizen. I'm guessing he is. Let's just say he lived in Great Britain and he said more truth than CNN. Am I supposed to say, I think CNN's more true than Russell Brand because CNN's American and he's Britain? That's not the reality of the situation. So if we really want to make America great again, our news has to get better. So they're always like, well, they said this and they said this. I don't care who says what. When they were doing vaccine mandates in Israel, I was with the Israeli people that didn't want to get the vaccination. I don't care what the government's saying. I don't care what Pfizer's saying, or I don't care what AstraZeneca does over here. Like the people involved, is it true? Is it right? Is it wrong? And this is the sad part about the American empire. We used to be so epic. We used to be so moral. We used to have conservative values. We used to have the First Amendment. We used to have a good economy based off of free trade. Like, America is still a great country, but when we used to do other stuff, it's like, yeah, we're better, you're worse. You know, you should be more like us. Now it's like, what do we want to do? Turn Tehran into San Francisco? You know, you can't fix New Orleans. You can't fix New York City. Like, our country's turning into a shithole. It's becoming a foreign bazaar. And Trump's big thing is that he's going to give away a bunch of federal land and make housing on it. We have enough houses. We have enough apartments. Every small town I've ever visited in my life is turning into like a strip mall with 1,000 apartments. There's nobody's like, oh, I can't find a house. Houses are everywhere. Yeah, the price is expensive, but you're going to give federal land to build more houses? Name one time government housing has been a good thing and turned to society. Hey, dude, come over to my neighborhood. There's a bunch of government housing and welfare projects there. I mean, it's a great place to be. No, everywhere the government builds just completely falls apart. They don't know what they're doing. And we don't need, that's Trump's big idea. The point that I'm getting to with my big rant is to make America great again. It's not just like lying, starting wars as our country falls apart and fighting other countries. We need to be honest. So I say all that to say this. Their whole strategy is very sneaky. And this is not just them. It's a lot of people. Well, they said this and they said this and Mossad said this. Okay, but what's the truth, right? It's not Russian disinformation to not believe that Iran is really close to a nuke, even though I'm not saying it's impossible. Anything's possible. But there's a compilation I found on Instagram. It was from like now back into like the 1990s. In the 1990s, Netanyahu said they were a couple months away from a nuke. Then they're a couple weeks, and a couple months, a couple weeks. Just basic critical thinking skills, regardless of what countries you do and don't support, says, well, if they said they were months away in the 1990s, and then 30 years later, they're still saying they're months or weeks away, it sounds like a lie. It sounds like an excuse to go regime change them. And anybody who thinks this isn't about regime change, you're an idiot. Oh, we're just going to get rid of their nukes. Were you born yesterday? Are you that stupid? Even Charlie Kirk realizes now they're trying to regime change. And Charlie Kirk's like, I'm against war. And Mark Levin is freaking out at him. He's like, Charlie Kirk, don't be kooky. I know who everyone is. It's an obvious plot. Once you know the main story, everything else is the same. I could just play my videos from 7 years ago and still be right because it's the same story on loop. Charlie Kirk has good instinct. Charlie Kirk's a Christian. Charlie Kirk does love America, and he prioritizes America first. But Charlie Kirk's organizations take donor money from people that like Israel just as much, if not more, than America. Charlie Kirk is attached at the hip to politicians who take money and are sold out to the donors. So Charlie Kirk not only takes donor money, but he's surrounded around people who do. So even though Charlie Kirk probably agrees with me and has instinct like Tucker Carlson, he's got to play a different game. Tucker doesn't have to play a game. He's been rich. He's rich. He he could say whatever he wants. Charlie's got to be like, oh, so, like Charlie's like pro-Israel, but then he likes America, but then it's this and then it's that. Mark Levin's telling you the quiet part out loud, which is, and this is my message to Charlie Kirk, who I do think deep down inside is a patriot. It doesn't matter how much you do for Israel or people like Mark Levin. It doesn't. They're still going to call you anti-Semitic, and they're still going to get mad at you if you don't do everything they want for the country that they like more than America. They want you to support speech laws that say that you can't say what I just said. They want you to infringe on your First Amendment for them. They want you to crack down on legal protests at college campuses for them. They want money every year or else you're an anti-Semite. They want every war. They need to fight this war and that war or else you're this or that. Even though Charlie Kirk is like 99.999%, pro-Israel and bends over backwards for them, Mark Levin's still going to call him a kook, because if you ever have pro-America tendencies or America first tendencies like Tucker and Charlie both do deep down inside, they're going to end up hating you too. It's not a matter of how you being honest and stuff. It's a matter of they want certain things at the expense of certain things, and it doesn't matter what it takes. The neocons, the Zionists, the deep state, the Warhawks, the Bushes, the McCains, the Romneys, everybody, the Democrats, they've wanted this war for decades. And people need to understand too, it's been dominoes falling. Domino fell. Starting a war with Russia and Ukraine was another domino. It weakened Russia. It made Russia have to pay attention to its borders. And while Russia was paying attention to its borders and not helping Syria, they toppled Syria with an Al-Qaeda member, and now a former Al-Qaeda member runs Syria. And they're more friendly to the United States and Israel than Bashar al-Assad was. And even Soleimani was fighting ISIS. Look it up. I'm not saying you have to like Soleimani, because I don't care whether you do or not. I don't know anything about him, but he was fighting ISIS. Do you notice a pattern? It's like he's fighting ISIS, we kill him. We pretend like we're fighting Al-Qaeda. Oh, Al-Qaeda did 9/11. We got to go fight them. And then we end up in a 3-part proxy war where Al-Qaeda essentially, or their former member becomes the leader of Syria. And we're thrilled about it because that's better for us. Why would that be better for us? Unless, hello, I don't need to spell it out for everybody. But anyway, all these things are connected. So now we're at the precipice of the war with Iran that the neocons, the Zionists, the Mark Levins, the Ben Shapiros, the Fox News, the New York Post, all these fake opposition media. And I've told people this for years. New York Post does some good work. Fox News does some good work. A lot of people do some good work. But at the end of the day, they're Zionist first. When it comes to America and Israel, they're going to side with Israel. When it comes to the First Amendment or a speech law for Israel, they're going to side with a speech law for Israel. If it comes to the freedom to protest any country you want and them trying to say that protests against that country are bad, they're going to side with that. That's what Zionist media does. That's what New York Post is. That's what Fox News is. That's what pretty much every news is. If you want to know who isn't under that spell, or at least controlled by that, or have some sort of ethnic or religious bias, whether it be Christian or other. And I'm not saying all Christians believe that, because historically they didn't, and that's like a new phenomenon, the whole dispensationalist thing. But if you want to know who's not controlled, just look who's getting fired. Tucker Carlson, fired, biggest show on television. Why would they fire the guy with the biggest show on television? Because it's not about necessarily just money. It's about narrative control. You can't have Tucker Carlson at a television station when you know you're about to start a war with Iran, knowing damn well he's the star of Fox News, and you need all the stupid boomers, no offense, that watch Fox News to believe that the war is good. If everybody on Fox News says that the war is good, the war is good, the war is good, and Tucker Carlson's on Fox News explaining why it's not, and he makes more sense and he's more believable than everyone else, it screws up their war agenda. So Tucker Carlson has the #1 political show on television. They fire him anyway. Candace Owens is the biggest star in conservative media and has the highest ceiling of anybody, and they get rid of her. Yeah, money matters. It's good to have attention, etc. But when you have a 30-year deep state plan, essentially to start this multi-pronged war, and you're literally at the 1-yard line of the war, look at Mark Levin's Twitter. If you want to know like how much Trump is or isn't doing, just look at what Ben Shapiro or Mark Levin are saying. If Mark Levin and Ben Shapiro are mad at Trump, they fear that he's not going to do everything that Israel wants to do and people that prioritize Israel over America. Today, Mark Levin's freaking out. Even though he's getting nearly everything he wants, he's freaking out at Charlie Kirk. He's freaking out at Trump. That tells me that Trump meeting with Steve Bannon, who is completely against Mark Levin's foreign policy, they're nervous because Trump plays both sides like a fiddle, even though he usually always ends up siding with the Mark Levins of the world. But they're like, that's why even originally they didn't like Donald Trump, because they're like, we don't know if this guy's as easy to control as George Bush or, Mitt Romney or Rubio. Like, we know Rubio's a puppet. Will Trump? And that's why they're always flip-flopping on him. They're like, do we like him? Do we, the same people that hated him like a year ago because he wasn't doing everything they wanted, or the same people that were campaigning for Ron DeSantis because they knew he was in the bag just as much as Trump, or they felt like they could control him more. Now all of a sudden they're like, you're not MAGA if you don't like this war. It's like the second Trump agrees with them, they think they're ultra MAGA. And then the second Trump doesn't like immediately attack Iran, Mark Levin's like freaking out on his Twitter. He's like, come on, Trump, hurry up, fight him. And it's like, that tells me that Trump's thinking about it. That tells me that, Trump is playing a different game. And I want to say this too, because I have no idea. Trump could be totally in the bag. He seems like he is. I feel like he is fake opposition. I feel like Trump is a puppet, but he's the most interesting puppet where you always wonder, you're like, is he going to side with us or no? Is he going to throw us under the bus again? So I'm just going to say this part of the war, which I'm trying to see what's happening. Israel started the war knowing that basically they could get America to fight the rest of it for them, even though they say they're going to fight it on their own. I don't know that they want to. And with that being said, it says that Israel's missile defense is like costing hundreds of millions a day, and they only have a couple weeks left. I'm sure they'll be fine. I'm sure they could convince our Congress to send them more money, or they could print it out of thin air. I don't know. But in general, it's like, I'm not worried about Israel. I'm sure they'll be fine. With that being said, it's like, maybe this is just a hypothetical. I'm not trying to go QAnon on it. I'm just trying to be reasonable about it. Trump does like having leverage. If he waits longer, the longer he waits, the more desperate Israel gets. The longer he waits, I would say the more Iran seems to be getting hit to some extent too. And I'm not saying it's good, but it's like, if he could stall this out, if he makes a decision now, Mark Levin's like, do what I want right now. It's like, well, might as well just make Mark Levin the president then, because we don't even have any leverage or say. But if Trump waits a little bit and kind of plays his hand, I think every day that goes by on a strategic chess level, Trump has more and more power, because, I think his great ally gets more and more desperate, because they're like, hurry up and do it, dude. We've been waiting 30 years for this. Now's the time. And, part of me thinks Trump's just going to do it anyway. He plays both sides. He's like, I'm this, I'm that, I'm everybody, I'm you, I'm a working class man. And then he just does what Israel wants. That's if I could guess, I would say 70%, 80% of me thinks he's going to do that. Maybe 90%. But, I still have 10 or 20% where I'm like 30%. Maybe he's trying to gain leverage over them. Maybe he can end this war. I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comment section. I would say it's interesting stuff. I pray for Israel. I pray for peace. I pray for Iran. I don't want people to get hurt. I know that's controversial nowadays, but I don't want any civilians to get hurt. I want the war to stop, and I don't want to get in a bigger war, because China and Russia can enter this war as well at any point. And now we're fighting a bigger war, and I think it's starting to happen. So outside of how sick war is and disgusting, because it is, I do have to say it's interesting, just because like now China's moving this piece. If you ever played the game Risk, we're very close to war. We're at war basically, but it's like now the big pieces start moving. Now the Chinese pieces start moving. Now the American pieces start moving. Like there's bigger strategy than just Mark Levin screaming bomb them, bomb them, bomb them. Like, yeah, that would benefit you, I guess. But this is my thought as well. And I'm going to end on this note. I wonder, let's just say in 10 or 15 years, and America's just getting screwed over like it's been. And let's just say Israel is completely secured. They've beaten all their enemies, and they don't really need America anymore because they have everything they need. I wonder how many, and I know you're not supposed to say this, but I'm just saying it anyway. I wonder how many Americans will move to Israel and be like, yeah, I was always loyal to this country. Yeah, this is the country I support. This is my homeland. These are my people. And I've always had more loyalty to them. I guarantee the number's not going to be zero. And to me, once again, you're not really supposed to say this out loud, but I think that's kind of the plan for a lot of people. Not everyone. There's a lot of people like Dave Smith who everybody hates because he's an American citizen. I have Jewish friends. They have no loyalty to Israel. All their loyalties to America. There's a lot of people like that. There's left-wing Jewish people who their loyalty is to protesting Israel and also protesting for abortions. Like, Jewish people are not a monolith. There's all sorts of different thought processes, but there are a lot of people, when it's all said and done, people will realize that they're very similar to Jonathan Pollard, who spied on America, got our secrets, and used it as leverage for Israel. And when it's all said and done in 10, 15 years, you'll see people that would have called you an anti-Semite for saying something, and now they'll basically admit that it's true, and they just needed, that for cover because they didn't want people to talk about what was really happening. Let me know what you think in the comments. God bless you. I'm trying to keep this under an hour. Yeah, I have a lot more to say, but I should probably just end it. Maybe I'll go live tomorrow or later today.